2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock. We are live. Blast off. Oh, you can see my microphone now. I'll just dip that off. Hello. Good afternoon and welcome to SpacetoLearn. How is everyone today? How are you all doing? It is open now. People are flying in. What are the numbers saying? They're coming in. We'll let you get settled. Relax. We've got a few minutes. Calm down, everyone. Take a seat. Grab a drink because we've got an hour of fun coming your way. We've got a very special guest for you today. We are going to be joined by NASA astronaut, aquanaut, brain surgeon, author, pilot. Yeah, I'm still talking about the same person. It is astronaut Dave Williams. Oh, round of applause for Dave. And we've got a very special guest coming in as well. Manchester United and England footballer Wes Brown is going to stop by and ask a few questions himself. What a treat. I don't know about you, an astronaut and a footballer. That is like the best, a Man United footballer. That is the best. It's the best Tuesday you could ask. It's a dream Tuesday for me. So thank you for joining. It's going to be a good one. Now, this is a live Q&A. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments or give us a follow on Twitter at ISSET_STEM. Let me just pop that up there. There you go. At ISSET_STEM. That is Instagram as well, Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, you can ask us a question using the hashtag SpacetoLearn. We'll pick all the best questions and then we'll ask them to Dave live over the next hour. How good is that? The theme today is to burp or not to burp. That is like, should you burp in your spacesuit? It's questions like that, whatever you want. Silly questions, smart questions, anything. Just help me out. I need your questions flying in. So get them in the chat or get them on Twitter. Right. Should we head over to the man himself? Dave, are you there?
I am indeed, and I'm thrilled to be here. It's a really exciting opportunity to talk about how our body adapts to being in space. You know, we've all been kind of living in lockdown for a while. Hard to exercise when you're in lockdown, kind of like being on the space station where it's hard to exercise. So we're going to talk about all these things today, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Should we start with a presentation?
Well, I think we could, but you know what? I'm going to start with the question that we always ask every astronaut, every week, the basic one. So no one needs to ask this one. But why did you want to be an astronaut, Dave?
I think being an astronaut is the best job ever because I'm trained as a scientist and as a doctor. So I get to do all that, but I get to do it in space. I also get trained to scuba dive. I became an aquanaut. I'm a pilot. I fly high performance jets. And of course, you get to go fly in space. And that's one of the most amazing jobs ever, where I can combine everything that I love doing all in one occupation.
Amazing. You have had the coolest life ever. It's incredible. All right. Well, shall we start off with the presentation? What are you going to show us?
Well, I've got some pictures from some of my books, and I'm going to talk about how our body adapts to being in space, which is kind of a fun thing to be able to do. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone, and we'll get started because we can. So, you know, I wrote a book called Defying Limits, but the one that we're really going to focus on today is that very important question, to burp or not to burp. And we're going to talk about this in great detail. So for those of you who are wondering, don't worry, we're going to get to the answer. So, of course, living and working on board the space station is absolutely incredible, and we need to study how our body adapts to being in space to be able to go farther, to go back to the moon and on to Mars. Lifting off to go into space, it's the ride of a lifetime. This is a launch video from my last mission. Let's have a look at what it's like.
All right.
60% of our time getting ready for this specific event. The whole thing happens in 8.5 minutes. The orbiters, when you get there, is just a living, breathing thing. Everyone's been cleared away from 3 miles. You know you're about ready to go for the ride of your life. We have some pretty good sound here. It's just not coming up. The whole ascent phase, 8.5 minutes. You get up there, the main engine's cut off, and within that period of time, you're now trying to figure out, with 60% of your training done, what you're going to do for the next 2 weeks in the mission. Pretty good shot here of the when the solid rocket boosters separate and we separate away from that. It's a pretty smooth ride now on the main engines. You go from about 2 some G's on your chest to about 1. And then as you burn down the fuel, you get to about 3 Gs. It gets kind of hard to breathe. You really got to be deliberate in your actions. It's kind of hard to move around. You're kind of pinned to your seat. And then as soon as the engine's cut off, you're just thrown forward and you're strapped.
So talk about a ride of a lifetime. It's absolutely amazing, especially that last minute of 3G. But when you get to space, there is no up and no down. You can orient yourself in any way you want. So learning to adapt to that environment is kind of fun. We actually use foot loops to hold us in place. In space, don't worry about shoes. The only time we wear shoes is when we're exercising. If we're on the treadmill or if we're on the exercise bike, or lifting weights, we would wear exercise shoes at that point. But otherwise, you're just going around in your feet and you use foot loops to hold yourself in place. The funny part is that when you develop calluses, it's not on the bottom of your feet, it's on the top of your feet where your toes are tucked underneath those foot loops. So of course, in space, in the absence of gravity, water and liquids are governed by the principle of surface tension. And this is important when we start to think about the answer to that question about burping in space or not. On my last flight, I released a blob of iced tea and it was kind of floating around in front of me. And you can stick a straw into it and slurp it down. But what's even more exciting is you can grab it with chopsticks and stick it in your mouth, because of the surface tension of the liquid, it'll hold on to those chopsticks and you're able to move it around. Great close-up picture of the iced tea. We got little blobs of air in there, which is kind of fun to be able to do. But I wanted to show you a video that Scott Kelly, our commander, took when he was on board the space station for a year, basically doing water art. It's kind of neat to watch.
So that's just like food colouring he's popping in there.
He's got food coloring, but he put an Alka-Seltzer tablet in there, which is why this blob of water is getting bigger and bigger, and you've got little pieces flying off because of the expansion of the gases inside. Isn't that amazing?
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's fun is playing with your food when you're in space. You can make it any way you want. You can stick your tortilla on the wall of the space shuttle or the space station, throw your eggs on. You can play with your M&Ms or your sugar-coated candy. This is the food that we have when we're in space. It's all freeze-dried. It's like camping food and things, and it does taste different. This is a picture from my book, To Burp or Not to Burp, A Guide to Your Body in Space. It tastes different because all the fluid in your body shifts to your face. You get a big puffy face, and it's like having a cold on Earth. So we add a lot of seasoning. All right, the famous question, should you burp or not when you're in space? Okay, so if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see someone where they basically are on Earth. They're standing up, and the air in their stomach goes to the top of their stomach, and all the fluid and all the food and all the other stuff goes to the bottom of your stomach. So if you're on Earth and you burp, it's just air that comes up, and it's kind of fun to make different noises, but of course our parents don't get too excited when we do that at home.
No.
If you're in space, kind of in the center there, all the stuff in your stomach, it's kind of floating around. It's all mixed up. So when you burp in space, it's kind of random what's going to come up. It might be air if you're really lucky, but it could be your turkey tetrazzini you had at lunch. And if that comes up, you just got to swallow it right back down again. That's part of the joys of being in space.
Oh, wow.
Going to the bathroom. Yeah. The bathroom's kind of cool. You got to go very carefully, but that's the toilet on board the international. Actually, this one's on the space shuttle. The one on the space station is very similar. So let's pause. I'm going to come back to you, and maybe we can answer some questions.
Yeah.
If people have questions about all this.
Let's do. We've got a few questions coming in. We still need a lot more questions, though. There's a lot of people on the chat just having a general chit chat, but we want your questions, guys. So, just get them in to Dave. He'll answer anything for you. Let's go first, though. Leon, age 7, says, are there any plants in space?
There are plants in space. In fact, we're experimenting with different ways of growing plants in space. Started off with flowers, but now we're experimenting with growing lettuce because, of course, if we send humans back to the moon and ultimately onto Mars, it's going to be hard resupplying those people with food. So if they can produce their own vegetables and fresh vegetables, that'll be great. Then it changes the nature of the resupply missions. But those are questions that are important for the future of spaceflight.
Okay. I was just wanting to ask about the picture with all the food of the cartoon from your book. There's a salt shaker in that picture. Surely you don't have salt in space, do you? That would go everywhere.
Well, we do have salt in space, but to stop it from going everywhere, what we do is we dissolve it in water. So in fact, if you want to put salt on your crisps or any item of food when you're in space, you take the salt and you squirt it on. It's kind of like going to the ocean, sucking up some of the ocean and squirting that on your hot dog for lunch. But anyway, it's an interesting situation. Of course, pepper, you got the same problem. So the pepper is suspended in oil and you kind of squirt that on whatever food that you want to eat.
Okay. Well, a load of people are asking about space food. What are your favorites?
So my favorites, it varies for every astronaut. And the big challenge with space food, it's kind of like being in lockdown. Food gets boring after a while. You want to have variation. You want to be able to try different things. So we pick our food ahead of time. And what I found when I was in space is with all those changes that take place in my body, I wanted spicy food. So shrimp cocktail is really popular because the horseradish sauce is really, really spicy. We actually fly wasabi paste, so we can add that to whatever food you want. But people tend to use a lot of spices when they're in space. The scrambled eggs are pretty good. They're all dehydrated. So you have to add water, kind of like when you're going camping, and let it sit for 15, 20 minutes or so to rehydrate. But they're pretty good. We don't really have a lot of fresh fruit for obvious reasons. You only get fresh fruit and vegetables when there's a resupply mission. And when you bring up fruit to space, you want to bring up fruit where you can eat everything. So apples are fantastic. Bananas, not so much, because the banana peel is left over as trash and it tends to smell after a while. So it's interesting, grapes are fantastic as well, but the type of food we eat in space is a little bit different than what we might be eating on Earth.
I was going to say, you don't want to open the grape bag and then suddenly just pour out everywhere. I hope they're locked down properly. Okay, fantastic. Right, let's have another question. Savit is a regular. He's on every show asking questions. Hi, Savit. What do you like most about your training?
I think being able to train in so many different things is what I like the most. When you first become an astronaut, many people say it's like drinking from a fire hose. There's just so much to learn. And pretty well every astronaut that I know loves learning, and they love learning different things. So on any given day, I could start my day off by going to the gym, doing my spacewalking workout where I do some aerobic exercise, some weight training. And then I might go in a simulator, and a simulator could be for the T-38 supersonic jets that we fly, or it could be for the spacecraft that we get to use to get to the space station, or it could be the space station itself. Then I might go and have to study about the different systems in space and then learn about some of the experiments that we're going to be doing in space. It's a really great opportunity. If you love learning and if you love science, being an astronaut is the place to be.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, any moment now, Dave, we may be being joined by our special guest to ask you a few questions. So we'll just keep an eye on the screen in case he pops up any second. We'll try and get another quick question in just in case. Felicity asks, do you think aliens are real?
Well, that's an interesting question. So when we go to space, we're from the planet Earth. So we become the aliens. So imagine if you're on the surface of the moon, you're actually not from the moon. So you, by definition, you're the alien on the surface of the moon. Or if you go to Mars, you're not from Mars, so you become the alien. I know what you're wondering, though. Have I ever seen aliens? I haven't seen aliens. If you think about living things, though, like bacteria and other forms of life, it's quite possible that other forms of life may exist even in our own solar system, because we're beginning to discover water on different planets in our solar system. But certainly out there somewhere in the universe, I'd be willing to bet that there's another planetary body that has living things on it. And that's one of the reasons why we go to space, is to study all of this.
All right, fantastic. Well, we have a special guest. He has appeared. Let's go live to Mr. Wes Brown. Wes, are you there, dude?
Hey, how you doing? How is everyone? Hi, Dave.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, just getting along fine.
What have you been up to in lockdown then, Wes? You've been keeping fit and healthy?
I'm doing something every day with my friends on Zoom chats, on WhatsApp chats, all different things. So yeah, keeping the kids busy with the homework. So there's no rest day.
Have you got a football pitch in the garden?
No, I've got nets.
Okay,
nets.
well, that'll do. That's good. That's good. Well, thanks so much for joining us, dude. We really appreciate it. And I know you've got a couple of questions for Dave, maybe. So when you're ready, fire away.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. So Dave, I know you have to be very fit to be an astronaut, physically and mentally. When on a space shuttle, how do you continue to do that on a daily basis? And what sort of exercises would it be?
Well, there's two broad categories of exercise that we focus on. One is the aerobic conditioning, and then the second would be resistive or weight training. And the resistive training is important to maintain your muscle strength to do spacewalks. So when I was flying on the space shuttle, we had a cycle ergometer, just like you would in the gym. The funny part about our cycle ergometer, though, is we set it up on the flight deck so you can look out the overhead windows at the Earth going by. And I can honestly tell you with a totally straight face, I have cycled around the world, around the whole planet in 90 minutes, because the cycle ergometer is on the space shuttle and we orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, that's quality. How was it? How did you feel once you landed? Did you feel in the same physical sort of state, or did it drain a lot out of you?
It drains a lot out of you. You know, I think the best way to describe it is I felt gravitationally challenged. Even standing up, you know, initially it takes a lot of strength to be able to do that. I remember bending over to pick up my helmet for the spacesuit and thinking, who put bricks in my helmet? Everything seemed to weigh a lot more. And it takes time to get back into shape on Earth. You know, it's about 1.5 to 2 times the mission duration. So if you're in space for 6 months, it's going to be probably 9 months or so, maybe even up to a year before you get back to your normal pre-flight conditioning.
Thanks for that, Dave. Cheers,
All
mate.
right. Wonderful. Wes, I've got a question for you, which is kind of a football and a space question in one. Out of your whole career at United, which player was the best at finding space?
Paul Scholes.
Oh, of course it was. Of course it was. That's a good answer. Great answer. All right. Well, Wes, thanks so much for joining us. And what you got planned for the rest of the week? You've got any advice for all the kids watching, what they should be doing to keep themselves busy?
Yeah, well, as much activities if you can. If you've got a garden, it's good to go out and just have a play about. If you like football, netball, basketball, whatever you can do, play games, tag, hide and seek, anything you can make up in the house works as well.
All right, fantastic. Well, thanks again, dude, for joining us. Really appreciate it, and stay
Thank
safe.
you. Thank you.
Cheers, Wes. There you go. Wes Brown. He plays for my team, plays for Man United, Dave. So are you a big football fan, soccer fan?
Yes. Yeah. What a fantastic game. Can you imagine playing football on the surface of the moon in 1/6 gravity? That would be incredible, right? Yeah. I wonder if you're going to have to increase the size of everything. Just make it all bigger, because when you kick the ball, it's going to be going a lot farther, a lot higher.
It'd be a lot easier with the offside rule. I don't know if you know you'd probably be able to see register the offside rule a bit better. All right. Well, yeah, thanks again to Wes for that. Let's get back to everyone else's questions. I know you're flying them in. Tony Wren Primary asked, what do you do if you need the toilet when you're on a spacewalk?
Well, the trick is to avoid that situation. But you know, generally when we go outside for a spacewalk, keep in mind these last 6.5, 7.5 hours. It can be pretty lengthy. So there's no question, you know, just like going outside skiing or whatever, you go to the bathroom before you go outside to do the spacewalk. However, when you're outside doing the spacewalk, you may have to go to the bathroom. So what are you going to do? Well, we wear, believe it or not, diapers. And that's all you can really do inside the spacesuit. Now, I've done 3 spacewalks. I've never used my diaper, and I'm telling you the truth on this one. And you're probably wondering, like, well, how did that happen? It turns out that when you're doing a spacewalk, you're breathing 100% oxygen and you're working really, really hard. So your body's losing fluids. You know, you're sweating inside your spacesuit just like you would if you were working out in the gym. And every time you breathe in and out, your body actually loses water when you're breathing, simply because the air that you breathe in generally tends to be a little bit drier, and your body humidifies it, and you exhale and that liquid kind of disappears. So where I'm going with all this is that you're dehydrated during the spacewalk. I had 32 ounces of water to drink. I drank the whole thing. I never once felt like I needed to go to the bathroom. And in fact, I came back inside, and when you go to the bathroom, you look at things and it's really, really dark yellow, meaning that you're basically really dehydrated. So that's one of the situations that we experience when we're out there. But if you have to go, you've always got your diaper.
Okay, I was wondering as well, because the spacewalks, they can be up to kind of 8 hours long, can't they? Do you have?
Yeah.
I mean, do you get like really hungry? What do you do for food? I guess you have water in the suit. Is that right?
Water. Yeah, there's
But
no
no
food
food.
though.
No.
No food at all. Back in the early days, we used to have, you know, the equivalent of an energy bar that was inside the suit, and you'd be able to chew away on it. The problem, though, is that pieces break off and it's floating around inside your helmet. It can get caught up in the fans for the spacesuit. It's not good at all. So we basically stopped doing that. And to be honest, you're so busy. I was never hungry during the spacewalk at all. You're just so busy going from one thing to another. And of course, we eat before we go outside, do the spacewalk.
Yeah.
So it was never really an issue.
So hang on, the silly question, but if the chocolate bar, the energy bar's in there, what is it? Just like wedged so you can kind of bite it in your helmet? Is that so? It's like fastened in there.
It's always hard with a helmet on, taking it and trying to do this, right? You know,
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. So yes, it is stuck right in front of you. And it's the same thing with the drink bag. The drink bag is kind of like one of those bags that you would wear in a backpack, except it's on the front. And it sits between your chest and the front of the spacesuit. And there's a bite block that comes up, and it's right by the corner of your mouth. So it's easy to take a sip of water, and then the bite block closes and there's no problem at all. But the food bar used to be kind of stuck right beside it. The idea was you'd nibble away. And as you're eating the food bar, of course, then you have to pull it out of its container a little bit more. It just really didn't work all that well. So I certainly never missed it when I was doing my spacewalks.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. Okay. Lots of people are asking, was it scary when you first went into space?
Yes. And, you know, it's interesting because you train and you train and you train and you're ready for this. When you're actually, I remember on my first space flight, I was on the space shuttle flight deck as one of the engineers on the flight deck. And the last thing you do before liftoff is at T-2 minutes. You close the visor of your spacesuit, you turn the oxygen on in the suit, and then you wait. And, you know, during the first 30, 40 seconds, you're looking out the window, go, wow, it's such a beautiful day for a launch. Our guests are going to love this. And then somewhere between T-30 seconds and T-6.6 seconds, most people have this huge reality check the first time you do it. You're going, I hope this is going to work out okay. In fact, we joke and say, once the solid rocket boosters ignite, you're going someplace really fast. Hopefully it's going to end up in space. So yeah, it can be scary. But once the main engines start, the solid rocket boosters ignite, your training kicks in, and then you're totally focused on doing what you need to do. And for most people, I find that you're either afraid before you do it or after you do it, not so much while you're doing it, because while you're doing it, you're just too busy. You can't think about being afraid and things like that. But, you know, sometimes we just simply say that astronauts speak, "It got my attention," meaning that was pretty scary.
Okay. But it's terrifying. Yeah, but it's really scary afterwards thinking about what you've actually done. All right, we'll do one more quick question, then we'll go to another video. Johan McGettigan asks, when do you think we will live on Mars?
I hope we're going to live on Mars in my lifetime. You know, certainly within the next 20 to 30 years, it would be really exciting seeing that happen. We've had humans permanently on the space station since the year 2000, which is incredible to think of. For the last 20 years, we've had humans permanently in space. But, you know, we're planning on sending humans back to the moon and then ultimately on to Mars. So it's quite possible that somebody listening to this today, watching this presentation, could become the next generation of astronaut that's going to get a chance to go to Mars and live and work on Mars. And if you think that's impossible, remember when I was a kid and I said I wanted to be an astronaut, I was told that was impossible. So, you know, with the technology that's available today, you never know what's going to happen.
If you got asked tomorrow, you could go to the moon or Mars tomorrow, where would you go?
Either.
Either.
The moon, yeah, the moon is closer, right? It's about 3 days to get to the moon, and it's a lot of fun. You get a nice view of the Earth. So, you know, sign me up. So far, nobody's called, but anyway, I'd be really interested in doing missions like that. And it's an exciting time because those missions to the moon will be happening within the next 10 years.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, should we check out another video or some photos? What have you got for us?
I think we should. Let me go back. I'm going to share my screen again. And we'll go back to the presentation just simply because we can. We have this amazing technology. And let's talk about sleeping in space because we need to. So when you're living in space, of course, yeah, you get your own little sleep station. You know, it's kind of like a big broom closet, and you can go in there. You have your sleep restraint system. It's sort of like a sleeping bag that is in front of you. And the funny part about sleeping in space is when you fall asleep, your arms will float up and be floating right in front of you. My first space flight, I remember I was asleep and I was having this dream. It was kind of a strange thing. And I was dreaming that somebody was reaching out to grab my throat. And that was actually pretty scary. So I woke up and I saw my hands floating in front of my face. You know, that's just the way it is. But, you know, when you're in space, you can have dreams about being on Earth, but you can also have dreams about being in space. And now that I've flown in space a couple of times and I'm back on Earth, I will occasionally have dreams about being back in space again. It's a lot of fun thinking about those different environments. Of course, living in space on the space station, it's like living in lockdown. Your hair grows longer, except the big difference, if you have long hair in space without gravity, your hair floats everywhere. Great picture of Marsha Ivins, one of the NASA astronauts.
That's
and
brilliant.
Your hair just goes all over the place and things. But some people will put their hair under a baseball hat and in a bun. But, you know, if you're there long enough, you got to get a haircut. And the important thing to realize, just like during lockdown, the person that's cutting your hair is the person that you're living with, and you don't want to get them upset with you because you never know what they're going to do. They might give you your own unique haircut and things, which is kind of fun to think about.
Did that ever happen to you, or did you?
Hey, my lips are sealed. I'm not going to talk about that. Anyway, the fun part, shaving in space, you know, most people will use an electric razor. You can actually, if you want to, have shaving cream and try and put that on and use a regular razor. It's just easier using a regular razor and things. And brushing your teeth, I remember on my first space flight, all this training, years of training goes into the mission. You know, we get up to space, we're really, really busy. It's time to go to bed, and I'm looking at brushing my teeth. There's no sink on the space shuttle. So I'm looking around going, well, how do we do this? So of course you squeeze the toothpaste, it comes out, you grab it with the toothbrush. It's easier just to squeeze it right on the toothbrush. And then you can take a little blob of water, squeeze it, and because of the surface tension, that'll glom on to the toothbrush and the toothpaste. Then you can stick that in your mouth and brush your teeth that way. It's kind of cool to be able to do. There's a great picture of Sergei Krikalev running on the treadmill. And I think the American astronaut Sunny Williams actually ran the equivalent of the Boston Marathon while she was in space, while the marathon was being run on Earth. It's kind of neat to be able to do. So yeah, let's stop there again and see if there's any further questions.
When you're on the treadmill, because you mentioned that earlier, and I was going to ask them, but are you kind of weighted down? When you're running on the treadmill in the space station, are you running slowly, or are you running normal speed? How does it work?
This is a learned skill, you know, and it's hard to train for that on the Earth because, of course, you can have the same exercise equipment that you're going to use in space and practice with it, but you've got gravity to hold you on. When you actually get to space, there's a shoulder harness that you wear, and you got to put that on and then attach these elastic bungees on each side that hold you on the treadmill itself. And the treadmill is kind of narrow, so you really have to pay attention that you're actually running right on the treadmill. And it takes most astronauts a little bit of time to learn how to run on the treadmill wearing this crazy kind of shoulder harness, making sure that you're not rubbing your neck area or your shoulder area or anything like that. But it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to do, having that exercise capability in microgravity.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, Trish and Janvi, I hope I said that right, asked, what is the funniest thing that you've done in space? Giving someone a haircut, probably.
Talk about that. Yeah, so there's lots of things that you can do. You know, we have these sugar-coated candies. They're basically M&Ms that we fly in space. And you can have somebody go to the other end of the module, and you can then play basketball. You sort of say, open your mouth. And you take the M&M and you kind of throw it right towards the person, and it'll zip along, zip along, zip along, and it might actually go into their mouth, which is great. And then you get 3 points if that works out that way, or it might bounce off their nose or whatever. And yes, it is true that we do occasionally try bungee jumping, or the equivalent of bungee jumping, down the FGB tunnel itself. The FGB is a long, long module with basically lockers on each side. And you can push off at one end and stick your hands out in front of you like a superhero and fly all the way down this module, which is kind of cool. Or if you want, you can get your elastic exercise bands, tie one end to one handle of a rack, tie the other end to the other handle of a rack, pull the person back in the exercise band and launch them off and hope they don't bounce off a locker. So anyway, don't try that at home, by the way, and don't do that when you're in space.
I would do that all day. That's the footage when I see people going through that and just like with one push. That looks like the funniest thing. I think I'd do that all day if I was up there. I'd probably get told off there and get told to do some work. Okay. Music of Mystery. What interesting name that. What type of training did you need to do to become an astronaut? Well, you talked a bit about that earlier, but are there any other specific trainings you can talk about?
You know, I think your training as an astronaut starts when you have the dream of becoming an astronaut. And one of the most important things I talked about already is that lifetime love of learning and that passion to learn science, but also enjoying being in the outdoors, enjoying things like scuba diving, skydiving, flying airplanes and things. So the training, when you actually start, you go through generic training. So just learning all about spacecraft systems and spacecraft. It doesn't matter who actually built the spacecraft. There's many common systems in spacecraft. You have to have environmental control, life support systems, computing systems, navigation systems. So we learn all about that. And then we also learn about the survival skills we might need on Earth in the case of a launch abort or a landing abort. So there's a whole range of different things that you're learning. And it ranges from being in a classroom, learning material where we do have tests, to being in the simulator where, again, we would have exams, to being actually out in the field and learning how to work together as a team or practicing survival skills. So it's a really, really exciting environment to be working in.
Okay. Mr. Coburn Boy says, my 6-year-old brother would like to ask, is it cold or hot in space?
Inside the space station, it's just like being at home. The temperature is basically about the same. There's a thermostat, of course, and just like at home, you know, some people like it hotter, some people like it colder. But when you look at pictures of astronauts in space, we're generally wearing a golf shirt, a polo shirt, and nowadays we tend to wear long pants. Back, you know, on my first flight, we'd vary between shorts and long pants and things like that. But outside, when you're doing a spacewalk, it's pretty impressive. During a daytime, you know, when you're in the sun side of the Earth, so during a day pass, the temperatures can get up to around 200 degrees outside the space station. Depends where you're working and things. But more importantly, during a night pass, when the sun is on the other side of the Earth, in a situation like that, the temperatures can get down to as cold as minus 200. And we have heaters that are in our gloves because early on in the program, without the glove heaters, one astronaut was holding on to a metallic object for a long period of time, actually got some early frostbite on their fingers. So we realized that it's important to actually heat the gloves. We have electric heaters for the gloves themselves, and the rest of the suit is heated by our own body heat. So in a spacewalk, it's actually, the question is, how do we lose heat? So the cooling system is the important thing. And basically, if I want to warm up, I just decrease the cooling. And if I want to cool down, I increase the cooling in the suit.
Okay. And you just control that yourself? Do you
Yes.
do you report back and tell someone, or is there buttons on the suit that you do that with?
So it's actually right on the front of the suit itself, and you have a mirror because, of course, you have to rotate this dial. So first of all, you got to find it, and after training, you get really good at being able to find it. But then most of us just use a little wrist mirror to make sure that we're adjusting it to whatever setting we want, so we can read that. Generally, you're not reporting adjusting your suit temperature to mission control because you're so busy. There's so many other things going on, and it's generally what we call mission critical or mission focused communication, and nobody really is too worried about whether you're adjusting your temperature or not, unless there's an issue. So for instance, if it was during a night pass and I turned on my glove heaters and they didn't come on, that's certainly something that I'd be talking to mission control about.
Okay. And this is a bit of a Gendel silly question. I always look at those gloves, and they're really chunky big gloves, aren't they? Is there no way that they could make them a bit thinner and still as strong? Are they just that big just so they don't rip, basically, because you're working and doing stuff? Because they look kind of cumbersome to try and do fiddly things with.
So I think maybe somebody watching this today is going to invent a better solution. The challenge with spacewalking are the gloves, and it's the fact that we need to be able to do useful work with our fingers. So our suits are pressurized at 4.3 psi. 1 atmosphere on Earth is 14.7 psi. So the suit pressure is lower than atmospheric pressure. Because if I got into a spacesuit at 14.7 psi, my arms would be stuck out by my side, having to bend my arms. It would be a real challenge to move against the pressure of the suit. So we lower the pressure of the suit to try and compromise mobility, but also survivability. If you get the pressure too low, obviously you're not going to survive. So we have to breathe 100% oxygen, because if you think about 4.3 psi, it's like almost being on top of Mount Everest or so. And so we breathe 100% oxygen, and you can actually work inside the gloves. Now, could you develop a different glove? Can you imagine if your hand was inside this glove, but every time you flex your fingers, sensors trigger the fact that, oh, fingers need to flex, and there's a mechanical assist to flex the fingers. So we're thinking about these things for future spacesuits, because going back to the moon and on to Mars, we need spacesuits that are easy to get into, that are mobile, that don't have the risk of decompression sickness, and that we can do a lot of useful work. In the midst of the spacesuit, they're pretty big and bulky, kind of like playing hockey with hockey mitts.
Okay. Well, there's a lockdown project for you kids. Design a new spacesuit. Okay. Disha K asks, do you get taller in space?
You do. Without gravity, it's interesting. You don't grow, but in the absence of gravity, your spine kind of stretches out a little bit. So it turns out on Earth, I'm generally between 6 feet and 6'1" on Earth. It depends. At the end of a long day, I might shrink down, when things are kind of tough. But when I was in space, I was 6'2 3/4. So I kind of stretched out an inch and 3/4. I could actually be a basketball player in space.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. But as soon as you come back to Earth and stand up, you lose it, because, of course, with gravity, everything goes back to the way it was.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? That you can't keep those inches.
Yeah.
All right. Clop Macastro said, what were some of the experiments you did in space?
My first space flight, we did a whole series of experiments looking at how the body adapts to being in space. And it was both the human body, but we also had animals with us. We flew baby rats and adult rats, actually, but the baby rats lived through the phase of their lives where they would normally learn to walk, but they did that in the absence of gravity. And when we brought them back to Earth, the question scientifically was, would they be forever space rats, or would they learn to walk on Earth? And the quick answer is yes, they learned to walk on Earth, but they were permanently a little bit different than the control rats that lived on Earth. So we've done a whole host of different experiments, but you know, one of the ones I think somebody should do just because it's really cool. You talk about the water that kind of floats around, and you saw the video of Scott Kelly with the blob of water and the food coloring and things like that. Imagine taking a big blob of water, you know, fairly big one, and let the blob of water float around, and then you get a fish, like a goldfish, and you stick it in this blob of water. There's no glass aquarium. So the fish is going to swim around in the water in any orientation it wants, which is kind of neat to be able to think about. What's it going to do when it gets to the edge of the water? Is it going to swim right through the edge of the water and flop around and say, hey, who stole my water? Or is it going to stick its nose there and feel a little bit of resistance from the surface tension and go, oh, I'm not going out there, that's bad, and stay inside the aquarium? We don't know, but I think it would be fun to do an experiment like that.
I'd love to see that. What do you think it would do? I think it would just get, I can't imagine it would just get to the surface as if it was coming to the surface and go, oh no, I'm not going out there, and turn around.
Yeah,
But
I'm with you. That's what I think is going to happen. It's going to get there and it'll kind of go, oh, no, I don't think so. I'm going to stay inside and swim around. We had fish with us on my first space flight. We had swordtail fish and oyster toadfish. They had their own aquaria. It was kind of neat watching them swimming upside down, straight in this direction, that direction, flipped in orientation with each other. But we never took them out. You know, they stayed in their aquarium the whole mission.
yeah, I bet that is so bizarre. I bet they were looking at the other one, wondering why the other fish was swimming upside down. That's brilliant. Okay, Soldier 101 asks, how do you deal with the adrenaline and the nerves during takeoffs, and do you ever get used to it? I mean, again, you talked a little bit about the takeoff earlier, but yeah, do you ever get used to that? Is it just an unbelievable range of emotions to go through?
It's always a range of emotions. You do get used to it after, you know, you've done it more than once. It's amazing how quickly we can adapt to circumstances that normally we go, my goodness, that's kind of scary. So you do adapt fairly quickly, but every time you do it, you know, it's a ride of a lifetime. Going to space is not trivial. When you're sitting on top of 7.5 million pounds of thrust, going from being stationary to traveling 25 times the speed of sound, there's a lot of physics involved in that. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong. It's amazing how many times it goes really, really well, you know, but re-entry, same sort of thing. You're pulling incredible G-forces, whether you're coming back in the Soyuz spacecraft or even in the space shuttle, the G-forces build up during re-entry. So it always gets your attention. Spacewalking, the first time I did one, you're very focused on the task at hand because it's pretty scary looking over your shoulder at the Earth. The second spacewalk I did, I was much more relaxed. I was looking around saying, wow, this is really cool. By the time I was doing my third spacewalk, I'd put a local tether on, make sure the tether was locked. We were pushing away from the space station, floating freely in space. It was pretty incredible.
Oh, that's amazing. That sounds so good. Okay, let's do one more quick question, then we'll do a video. Fran Fernandez, do you have a shower in space?
Well, no. So, you know, back in the days of Skylab, when the NASA program had their first space station in the 1970s, they had a shower. And, you know, it was kind of interesting. You'd climb inside this big bag, like literally a big bag. It was big, basically a long cylinder, but, you know, it's essentially made out of material. And you get inside this thing, you'd zip it up. So now you're in a totally contained space. And you had a little water pistol kind of assembly, and you'd squirt yourself with all this. And then you get all soaped up and you're kind of like, well, what am I going to do with this? So you sort of vacuum the soap off. It really wasn't that practical. So what we do now is we use a sponge bath. So you take a towel and you wet the towel, and then you can sponge yourself off to clean yourself. And we use rinseless shampoo. So basically you put the shampoo in your hair and you clean your hair, and then you just take a towel and you remove the excess shampoo and things. But I can tell you, every time you're in space, and this is true for underwater missions as well, when you're living underwater, living in space, and you get back to Earth, one of the nicest things to do is be able to go have a shower.
Oh, I bet. Do you generally feel, I mean, obviously you do wash and you are clean, but do you kind of have that feeling like, I'm not quite clean enough? I'd like this shit, like you need a good shower to sort that out.
Yeah, I was never in space for 6 months or a year. So to be honest with you, I never really had that feeling. I can certainly imagine how you would get that feeling.
Mm.
One of the things living underwater, the challenge is you're putting on the same wetsuit every day, and bacteria grow in the wetsuits and things when they're hanging there because they're always wet. And in that environment, yeah, you kind of feel a little bit groggy after a couple of weeks underwater. My longest underwater mission was 18 days, and we were all pretty happy to get back to the surface at the end of that one.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, should we rock into our final little presentation bit?
I think so, just because it's fun and we can do that, which is kind of neat to be able to do.
And you're so good at sharing your screen. You're so slick at it, Dave.
I've had practice. So let's talk about spacewalking, because we can, and it's an absolutely amazing thing. This picture was taken on my first spacewalk, and of course I was very proud of having the Canadian flag on my shoulder. And when Tim Peake was out doing his spacewalk, it was great seeing the British flag on his shoulder. It's just absolutely incredible. So anyway, I'm working about 3 feet away from the solar array on the space station. And of course, I didn't want to kick that with my boot. That would have been really bad, kind of destroying the solar array. But let's have a look at a video of my second spacewalk where I had a chance to ride on the Canadarm. And I'm holding on to a gyroscope that we replaced on the space station that weighed around 1,200 pounds. The gyroscope itself was about 600, but with all the launch equipment and things, it was around 1,200 pounds or so.
On our second spacewalk, we went outside to replace one of the gyroscopes on board the space station. There are 4 gyroscopes that are used to stabilize the position. Rick is now removing the covering of the gyroscope that we replaced, and all of these are up on an area of the station in the center of the station called Z1. So Rick and I came out of the airlock and translated up hand over hand to Z1 to be able to uncover the CMG or the gyroscope and be able to replace it. We use drills, essentially like a power tool on the ground, and we put a socket on there and we undid the various bolts that were restraining it. Rick then grabbed onto the CMG, which weighs about 600 pounds, and he did what we call layback maneuver, kind of bending backwards at his waist to be able to lift the CMG out of the way. And then he handed it off to me, and we restrained it temporarily, putting it on what's called a ball stack mud. It's basically a tool to restrain it to the space platform on the space station. Rick came back from the payload bay. We kind of rendezvoused and put this new one here on the stowage platform. And then we essentially did the swap, taking the new one and replacing it with the old one. But to do that required us riding on the arm back and forth between all the various work sites. And Scorch drove me back up to pick up the old one that had failed. And Rick and I finally installed that and swapped it on the external stowage platform.
Pretty amazing being able to do that. But while you're doing the spacewalks, you look over your shoulder at images like this, a great picture of the tongue of the ocean off the coast of the Bahamas, this underwater cliff where it goes from shallow water that you can see on the left to really, really deep blue water and things. Wow. It's amazing. On the last spacewalk, I was outside with Clay Anderson. We saw Hurricane Dean in the Gulf of Mexico. Tracy called and says, "Hey guys, take a minute and enjoy the view." So we were looking at this. It was amazing being able to see this. Or of course, seeing the northern lights dancing over a part of the planet, or the southern lights. It just depends what hemisphere you're in, which part of the planet that you're on. Looking down at the Nile River and the Nile River Delta, it's absolutely amazing being able to, of course, see Cairo and the pyramids, which you can see sort of a little bit off center.
Oh, yeah.
The 3 pyramids that are there, and it's pretty spectacular. Of course, we always get asked, can you see the Great Wall of China? The answer is yes. It's very, very long, but it's narrow, so it's actually hard to see. But once you know where to look, it's not too bad to be able to pick out. And of course, a great shot of the UK. And many of you are kind of sitting there, oh, that's my house. There we are. I know exactly where that is, but it's kind of neat to be able to look at London from space and think, well, that's where I live and that's my spot. And we do that when you're in space. One of the best things that we can do is look out the window. So, of course, it's all about the future now, thinking beyond the era of the International Space Station, going back to the moon. And maybe somebody watching this is going to be one of those astronauts back to the moon mission, or you could be on a mission going to Mars. And again, as I said before, if you think that's impossible, I was told that it was impossible for me to become an astronaut. I've flown in space twice, did 3 spacewalks, and lived underwater in 2 separate missions. So yeah, I've got a whole bunch of books. I've got the adult book, Defying Limits, which you can get on Amazon and download. I think there's a Audible version as well if you like listening to books. And I've got 4 kids books. The one, To Burp or Not to Burp, we talked about that today, how your body adapts to being in space. But the second one, Go for Liftoff, how you train like an astronaut. If you're interested in training like an astronaut, that's the book to have a look at. Mighty Mission Machines is about all the machines we work with. And Destination Space is really cool. It's about living on other planets in our solar system. And after I wrote that book, I came to conclude the best planet to live on in our solar system is the one we're currently on. So we need to take care of it for future generations. Yeah, it's kind of fun having a chance to do what I've been able to do.
Well, yeah, I just can't believe what you've been able to do. I think going back to the spacewalking, is that kind of the pinnacle for you when you're doing that? You're kind of like, I'm a real astronaut right now doing this. This doesn't get any more astronauty than doing a spacewalk.
You know, astronauts have lots of different things that they can do in space, ranging from science through to robotics and spacewalking. Not every astronaut gets a chance to do a spacewalk. And I was thrilled that I was able to have the opportunity to go do 3 spacewalks. I hold the Canadian record right now, and I'm actually hoping somebody's going to break that record because it means we have more Canadians in space and we're doing more things, which is kind of neat to be able to think about. But at one point when I was assigned to the spacewalks, Rick Mastracchio and I were scheduled to do 4 spacewalks. And I was 54 at the time that I did that mission, which that's not old, okay? But they had to verify that I was actually able to do those spacewalks and do it like we would in space. So we started off on a Monday. We did a simulated spacewalk underwater. We did one Wednesday. We did one Friday. And we did one the next Monday just to prove that Dave could do 4 spacewalks as we would in space. And then it turned out that we changed the order. We added Clay Anderson as a spacewalker. So Rick and I did 3, and Clay had a chance to do 2. So it was a lot of fun being able to do that.
Fantastic. Okay. Oh, I can't believe how fast the hour's going. Let's try and rattle through a few more questions if we can. I just saw a really good one. Right. Henry Yates. This is a brilliant question. What do you do when you have an itch during a spacewalk?
Don't think about it. If you start to think, it's just going to get worse. So it depends where it is, right? You know, if you have an itchy nose, you can try and blow up from your mouth onto your nose. We do have a little Valsalva device is what it's called. It's basically a little cushion that you can put your nose on to try and blow against to equalize the pressure in your ear. Just like, you know, if you're in an airplane and you're coming down to land, sometimes you'll pinch your nose and blow and you can feel your ears pop. So we've got that available, and that's actually not a bad itching block as well. You know, if you get an itch on the side of your nose, you can kind of scratch your nose, depends where it is. But that's about it. If you get an itch in your arm, good luck with that. You're not going to be able to do too much unless you can wiggle your arm inside the spacesuit and solve it that way.
Oh, just thinking about that makes me just have a need to scratch my nose just talking about it. I guess that's, again, going back, I don't know why I'm fascinated by the energy bar, but I was thinking about that when you said bits of it break off. The last thing you want is a bit floating off and going in your eye, and then you've got something annoying your eye for 8 hours. So is that kind of why you try not to eat it if you can?
Yeah, you don't want stuff floating around inside the suit. And when I did my first spacewalk, the bite block, I think the way I ended up sucking through it and then stopping, a little bit of water dribbled out of the bite block. And of course, it kind of floated around inside my helmet, comes up and stuck on my eyeglasses because I had to wear eyeglasses on my second space flight to see what I was doing. So anyway, that was kind of interesting. I got this big blob of water and, you know, needless to say, I couldn't see anything out of that eye, but this eye was working fine. So I just angled my glasses so that the flow of oxygen coming into the helmet evaporated the water, and it worked out. But you don't want stuff floating around in the suit. You know, we had another astronaut where there was a problem with the suit. There was a kind of a big blob of water, and they did an emergency termination of the spacewalk. So things like that, they can be a big problem. That's why it's important to think about that suit design for the future.
Okay. All right. Ryan asks, what would happen if you vomited in space?
Depends where you are. So
you don't
if you're
doing that in your suit.
Yeah, no, you don't. Yeah, that would be really bad because, as we just said, you don't want stuff floating around in the suit. And if you were to throw up in the suit, first of all, it's going to be end of the spacewalk. But secondly, it could be really problematic if you were to choke on that or anything. Oh my goodness, that would be bad. But anyway, if you're inside the space shuttle, Soyuz spacecraft, or the space station, you feel like you're going to throw up. Hopefully, you have your barf bag with you. And, most astronauts, when they first get to space, you always stick one in a pocket just in case. You never know what's going to happen. And you're better off having one if you need one instead of not having one if you need one and trying to borrow one from somebody else. But anyway, what you do is if you had to, you pull out your barf bag and you open the thing up and you use that. And then it's really important to seal it off and, stow it away appropriately in the wet trash. I was really lucky, to be honest with you. I was never sick in space. On my first space flight, the first 24 hours or so I was in space, my body didn't feel normal. I felt like I had a cold. I had a mild headache. I didn't feel like I was going to throw up, but I also didn't feel hungry for the first day or so. And then I got into my normal way of feeling and everything was fine. My second space flight, it was interesting. It was like I'd been in space the day before. Your body remembers what it's like. And basically, we say you hit the ground running, metaphorically. In other words, you just get back to space. You've done it before, and you're able to get on the timeline and start doing all the various tasks you have to do.
Okay. Julie McLean asks, how does your training on Earth compare to doing a real spacewalk?
It's really good, except for one critical thing that you absolutely can never forget. To train for spacewalks, we train underwater. And when you're training underwater, the water stabilizes you. Even though we weigh you out to be neutrally buoyant, the water itself, there's resistance moving through the water, and that helps you stabilize your position at a work site. It also means that it's hard to get going and easy to stop. In space, there's no water to stabilize you. It's totally opposite. It's really easy to get going and really hard to stop. And I don't know if you remember the first time you ever went ice skating, but for me, I got out on skates. I was a little kid. My mother is trying to hold on to me. No, I don't want anybody to hold on. I'm like this, and I get going really fast. And then I realize, how do I stop? And I collide with the boards, right? Well, in space, if you get going really, really fast, it is actually very difficult to stop. So when you're watching spacewalks, we kind of joke and say it's like watching grass grow, because we move so slowly because we want to stay in control the whole time, especially when I was holding on to that 1,200-pound gyroscope. I don't want to be swinging that around. If I swing it around, I'm going with it, and that would be a problem.
Definitely. Okay, let's try and get two more questions in. What happens if you become untethered on a spacewalk? Asked by Sakshi Sharma.
Don't do that.
Never become untethered.
Never become untethered. We have two tethers. Make sure you use them properly. But if for whatever reason you became untethered, we have a jetpack that we can use to fly back to the space station. The problem is you don't have a lot of propellant in there, so you got to get it right. You basically have one shot at getting back to the space station.
And does a little bit of you really want to have a go with the jetpack?
I'd want to be tethered if I was going to have a little go with the jetpack, just to see how it is. Yeah. And then after maybe doing it once tethered, then I'd be good to go and, have my full space wings and go fly the jetpack without a tether. And that's been done, of course, in the past, just to evaluate the capability of it. But the current version of the jetpack, when they tested it, the astronaut was tethered.
Okay. Last question. Tammy, age 17. If the sun is in space, then why is there light in the planet but not in space?
So remember, the light is traveling at the speed of light through space. So if we're looking at light coming from stars, the light actually goes to that body, is reflected from that body back towards us on Earth, which is kind of neat when you think about astronomy. You're basically looking through time at light that's come, from 40, 50 light years ago, or 300 or even more than that. But that's why. And it's interesting when you're doing spacewalks and you're outside orbiting the planet every 90 minutes, these transitions between daytime and nighttime. And for me, what was really remarkable is when you go from nighttime to daytime, you feel yourself warming up. And it feels like the sun is this life-giving energy and the warmth of it is something that's truly spectacular when you're outside in that harsh environment of space.
I bet. Okay, well, that is about all time we've got, Dave. Have you got any final messages for all the kids watching at home?
So I think it's been so much fun sharing my experiences with you today. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Don't let other people define your dreams. Find your passion, go for it. I found for me, anything that was really fun to do was also a little bit of work. So I had to work hard at it and things. And if you don't succeed, it's what you do that when you don't succeed that determines if you will succeed. Keep trying, but try a different approach and hopefully things will all work out. But it's been a real thrill sharing some of my stories with you today.
It's been a thrill, Dave. Thank you so much, man. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. You too. Take care,
dude. Stay safe.
Bye now.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And again, thanks to Wes for stopping in with these questions. That was absolutely fantastic. If you enjoyed it, we'll be here again, same time next week with another Space to Learn. Some other exciting things coming your way. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., our friends at Minerva Tutors are going to be teaching us how to make your own volcano. That sounds pretty wild. I don't know what that's going to, how do you make your own volcano? If you want to do that, go and check out minervatutors.co.uk to get involved. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel so you never miss any of our Space to Learns. And of course, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ISSET_STEM. That is it for now. Stay safe, everyone. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and we'll see you next week. This is Gendel spacing out. Spacing out.